Ladies and gents, welcome back. Now, the Ukraine situation is devastating, but what I find devastating is that people in the pursuit of calling for peace are seemingly unknowingly calling for escalation. We have here CTV News rallies across Canada called for NATO to issue a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Now, that sounds very okay on its face until you know what that means, really. Now, the article here goes into it a little bit.
In Ukraine, defiant residents of Kherson, near the Russian-annexed Crimea Peninsula, called for an end to the war. A similar scene in Germany, where as many as 30,000 people showed their support for Ukraine. It is the same story here in Canada. CTV's Heather Butts reports.
A wave of blue and yellow flowed over the streets of Toronto as hundreds marched near the U.S. consulate.
Please help Ukraine, save the lives. We're crying here.
In the crowd, a sea of umbrellas, a colorful symbol to help deliver their message.
The theme of this march is a no-fly zone, promoting it. So the umbrellas act as a shield.
That call echoing across the country today.
We want to close the sky in Ukraine.
For those
So the idea of a no-fly zone is the idea that NATO will come in militarily and enforce a no-fly zone. Now, that's a different story than calling for peace. Calling for peace would be protesting and organizing people literally calling for peace. But a no-fly zone is actually the enforcement of not being able to fly over Ukraine, which we know currently is being invaded by the Russian army. Now, if this was to take place, this is an actual provocation in the situation in Ukraine against Russian forces that we're not currently involved in. This is a war that's going on between the country of Ukraine, which is not a NATO member currently, and the country of Russia itself. Now, I've been accused in my comments, not by a lot of people, but there have been some that say I took things a little bit lightly. I'm not talking seriously about war when I made a video criticizing a Quebec restaurant for virtue signaling by removing poutine from their menu because it sounds like the name of the president of Russia. Virtue signaling that I've seen mirrored before, yes, in the drum up to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, when the country of France said they weren't going to get behind the war in Iraq, and people got upset and started virtue signaling by changing the name of French fries to freedom fries. It was a virtue signal, and this, at the time, the drum up to the war came with some serious rhetoric.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Yes, some serious rhetoric coming from George W. Bush at the time, which we all know how that went. The lies that led to the Iraq War and the persistent myth of intelligence failures. The claim of intelligent failure obscures the truth that the government lied by making evidence-less claims to manufacture consent of the war in Iraq. We have also problems with the shocking new book that exposes lies about Afghanistan. Many articles why the Iraq war remains a disaster nearly 20 years later, and the U.S. is still in there. Opinion, 20 years of Afghanistan mistakes, but this preventable disaster is on Biden. People obviously going to the partisan tactics, usually going in that direction. Now, I'm not gonna look at this situation lightly, and that's why I've been having a hard time covering all of the exact things that are going on, because, well, do we know what's going on? There is so much fake news out there. I covered this before. This is BBC article showing false news on both sides. We have information being shared from both sides of this, from the Russian side, from the Western side. the second day of Russian invasion, Ukraine has been accompanied by further false or misleading imagery on social media. Some of this is from video games, video game footage. There was the Ghost of Kiev story that was turned out to be completely fake, and media outlets got duped by Sam Hyde, who's a comedian who made it his job to dupe media into running stories with his face on it. We've also have old footage from old conflicts being shared. Again, old videos from conflicts, old video from a disaster in China that's being shared as Ukrainian things happening. This is another old video of a paratrooper that wasn't in a conflict at the time of shooting this. This was on his Instagram, but I digress. So the rally cries across Canada and across the world to call for a NATO no-fly zone in Ukraine is advocating for further escalation. Have no mistake about this. Honestly, if you asked any one of these NPCs, would they understand the repercussions of a no-fly zone? Would they know what they were advocating for a war bigger than has ever been imagined? This is not something we need to be treading into lightly. Yes, I'm with everyone calling for peace in the region. No, I'm not for calling for further escalations. I think diplomacy is the way to go. I think talking about things. We saw recently in Canada, we had protests and they didn't turn out very well, not because there was inaction, it was because there was no dialogue. So keep that in mind moving forward. Sorry for making such a serious video. I like to keep things a little bit light. But that is the case. Anyways, we'll see you guys in the live stream tonight, 6:30 Pacific time. Check your local listings, and we'll see you in the next video. Keep on trucking.